welcome back to my channel. So I've got this brilliant set of recommendations for beginners across all genres. I'll probably do a part 2 because there are too many genres that I can fit in, and I've picked like the top few in this, and there'll be another video where I talk about a few other genres in course of time. So let's get right into it. So the first book I'm going to recommend is Home Before Dark, and this book is amazing. This is by Riley Sager. The language is pretty simple and straightforward. You don't have to do a lot of reading between the lines. It is spot on the horror genre. It has haunted mansions, creepy people, an isolated mansion in the middle of a cottage side, a girl going back there. Oh my god, it's crazy. I'll read a little bit of the excerpt so you get an idea of what this is about. Maggie Holt doesn't believe in these things, even though they are the details of the story that made her family famous. 25 years ago, she and her parents, Evan and Jess, moved into Bainbury Hall, a rambling Victorian estate in the Vermont woods. They spent 20 days there before fleeing in the dead of the night, an ordeal Evan later recounted in a horror memoir, House of Horrors. His tale of ghostly happenings and encounters with malevolent spirits became a worldwide phenomenon, rivaling the Amityville horror in popularity and skepticism. Maggie has lived her life in the shadow of her father's book, or so when she inherits Bainbury Hall after his death. She returns to renovate the house to prepare it for sale. People from the past, chronicled in House of Horrors, lurk in the shadows, and locals aren't thrilled that their small town has been made infamous thanks to Maggie's father. Even more unnerving is Bainbury Hall itself, a place filled with relics from another era that hint at a history of dark deeds. As Maggie experiences strange occurrences straight out of Evan's book, she starts to wonder if what he wrote was more fact than fiction. So this book is so horrific. I swear it's not something that is new or not something that you would not expect, but still it always feels good to go back into a really nice ghost story. And I think Riley Sager did a brilliant job in this book, and I became a fan of his as soon as I read this book. So this is a book that I will highly recommend if you're into horror. For fantasy, I am recommending Heartless by Marissa Mayer. Where do I start with this book? This is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, but all of the characters in the book are so beautifully sketched out, and you will fall in love with Chest, who is our male protagonist in this book. And the Cheshire Cat is so sassy and so satirical. Amazing. I think this book was beautifully written. It's a standalone book, so you don't have to now most of the fantasies are either duologies, trilogies, or like a bunch of books, but this is a standalone book. It's just one story, and the way it entwines with Alice Through the Looking Glass is again just brilliantly written. The language is also really simple. So if I read what's in the back of this book: long before Alice fell down the rabbit hole, and before the roses were painted red, the Queen of Hearts was just a girl in love for the first time. So this book revolves around the Queen of Hearts and how she becomes the Queen of Hearts, and I think it is a beautiful book. So if you're looking for a fantasy read, just one book, standalone, and something simple that you can go through, I would recommend this book. There's not like huge high fantasy elements or even fantasy elements for that matter, and it's pretty easy to read. So that's what I would recommend. The next book that I would recommend for the genre dystopian is The Book of M. Now, I love myself a dystopian themed book, and it's really hard to find a good book. There are so many movies that come out in the dystopian genre, but really less books that actually make you go wow. I've read a few books, and I have a few other recommendations as well, but that'll probably be for a separate video where I'll just talk about like maybe 10 dystopian books that you can consider reading. But from a beginner's point of view, I want to recommend The Book of M. This is not only beginner in the sense beginner for reading, but also beginner for dystopian, because if you have not read dystopian before, then you want to read something like this book. It is a really new concept, but it's twined with like existing dystopian contexts. So it's just brilliant. I'll read the back of this book. It has a little bit of India also in it, which I thought was brilliant. But just listen to this. In the middle of a market in India, a man's shadow disappears. As rolling 24-hour news coverage tries to explain the event, more cases are discovered. The phenomenon spreads like a plague as people learn the true cost of their lost part, their memories. 2 years later, Ori and his wife Max have escaped the forgetting by hiding in an abandoned hotel deep in the woods of Virginia. They've settled into their new reality until Max too loses her shadow. Knowing the more she forgets, the more dangerous she will become to the person more precious to her, Max runs away. But Ori refuses to give up what little time they have left before she loses her memory completely and desperately follows her trail. But neither could have guessed at what you gain when you lose your shadow, the power of magic. So the reason why I love this book more was it's not just a dystopian story, but also the love story that's between Ori and Max is just so heartwarming and so beautiful that even, at end of the world scenarios, it shows you that love does exist and how people actually turn whenever there is a survival instinct that kicks in. So I always think that after reading these books that humans are humans' worst enemy, because every time something goes wrong, the first people to like start revolting, start killing others, start, I don't know, doing everything evil are humans. I don't think animals or any other kind of beings do that. So I kind of feel like this book resonates with what I felt as well. So that is what I will recommend for dystopian. For thriller, I am going to recommend Darling Rose Gold. Again, because one, this is a standalone book, and if you're a beginner, a reader, as well as a beginner into thriller, you don't want to get too caught up into the chase of the thrill. Instead, you want to relish the story and the characters as you go through, and that is why I recommend this book. It's a pretty simple and straightforward book, not hugely into twists and turns, but it will surprise you in the least expected ways. I love the cover of this book because I fell in love with it purely because it has this like rose gold finish and it's just so beautiful. I just wish it had like sprayed edges, but it doesn't. Anyway, I'm gonna read an excerpt of this as well, so as to spruce your interest in the book. Rose Gold, who the book is named after, Watts believed she was sick for 18 years. She thought she needed the feeding tube, the surgeries, the wheelchair. Turns out her mother is a really good liar. That's it. I'm going to stop right there because I don't want to read any more of this excerpt. Even that I feel is a giveaway. But it's just brilliant. There is another book like this from a contemporary genre that actually also has a similar storyline where the daughter thinks that she is sick and she's kept in the house for like a really long time, but her mother actually ends up lying. But this book takes a piece of cake. It has a lot of prison elements and what does the mother actually want to reconcile with her daughter, why she wants to reconcile, why she's out of prison. There's so many elements in the story that will keep you intrigued, and that is why I'm recommending this book for you. The next book that I would like to recommend from the young adult genre is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Now, the reason why I'm recommending this book is it is young adult, but there is a lot of elements that you can learn from this book, and also there's so much food for thought. So this book actually talks about this little girl who's just about 16 to 18, and she experiences the death of her best friend Khalil in a police shootout, and he was unarmed, and they're all African Americans, and there is a lot of racism that gets highlighted in this book and everything that a minority goes through in the US. But I also feel like this can be applied to so many different situations, especially around minorities. So I didn't want to recommend just another young adult book, and I wanted to recommend this book because the reading is pretty straightforward, so any beginner can go through this book, but there is so much of elements in this book that is going to keep you hooked, and then you want to give your voice out, your opinion. You have so much to think about after you finish this book, and that's how I wanted my recommendation to be, especially for this particular genre. So that is going to be my recommendation for young adult. The next book that I would like to recommend for contemporary is There's Something About Sweetie. Now, the reason why I like this book is I have read When Dimple Met Rishi and I did not like it as much. I know it's such a huge rage, but I have a whole video about me ranting about that book. And I know it's also a TV series now on Netflix, but somehow I couldn't affiliate with the book because it just felt very whiny in so many areas by all of the characters, and it just didn't sit well for me. However, this contemporary love story between Sweetie and this boy that she meets is beautiful. It gives you this Never Have I Ever vibes. So if you are into Never Have I Ever, you'll surely love this book. And also there's so much of like towards love or young love that's portrayed so simple and beautifully in this book. The language, of course, is so simple. So of course there is absolutely nothing that's going to keep you all night with complicated language, but this book also gives out a really happy, heartful feeling once you're done with it. So I will definitely recommend this book for contemporary. The next book that I would like to recommend from a philosophical genre is Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. Now, I know that Matt Haig and the Midnight Library and so many other books have come out after this, but somehow I felt that this book, or Mitch Albom per se, and his other books really stand out. Now, the reason why I like Tuesdays with Morrie is because it is very simple. So the storyline is an old man who's about to die, a young man who was his student in college, and life. So this book is so simple. It's really thin as well, so you can probably get through this really quickly, but it also teaches you something about life, and I felt that the way that it taught you about life was so much more easier and so much more fulfilling than a lot of other philosophical books I've read. So just to give you a little excerpt of this, this is also a biographical sort of tale of Mitch Albom and his real life college professor. So maybe like Mitch, you have lost track of this mentor as you made your way and the insights faded and the world seemed colder. Wouldn't you like to see that person again and ask the bigger questions that still haunt you, receive wisdom for your busy life today and the way you once did when you were younger? Mitch Albom had that second chance. He rediscovered Morrie in the last months of the older man's life. Knowing he was dying, Morrie visited with Mitch in his study every Tuesday, just as they used to be back in college. Their rekindled relationship turned into one final class, Lessons on How to Live. Tuesdays with Morrie is the magical chronicle of their time together, through which Mitch shares Morrie's lasting gift with the world. It is so beautiful, especially because it's like an old man's tale where he is teaching the young man to become more wise. So I really love this book, enjoyed it, went through it in one sitting, and would recommend this to a beginner, especially in philosophy, anytime. So that's my recommendation. The next book I would like to recommend is in the historical fiction genre, and that is the Luke's series. So this is actually a series. There are 4 books. I really wanted to share a historical fiction book that wasn't a series, but I love this book to bits and I really wanted to put it in the video. I do have a few other historical section books which are not a series that I probably would recommend separately in a different video, but for this video I want to recommend this because this book was everything. It was my foray into historical fiction for when I was like just getting into it, and it just pulled me right in, and I've been looking for beautiful historical fiction books ever since. So this book is kind of like if Gossip Girl was set in like the 1900s, so aka somewhat like Bridgerton, but this book came out much before Bridgerton ever did. So I wanted to recommend this. It's, if I read the excerpt in the back, imagine, if you will, New York City 1899. Society's elite, the glamour, the grandeur, the glittering parties, the most handsome beau, the most beautiful debutantes, the rich girl, the humble boy, the forbidden love, the stolen glances, the whispers, the scandal, the mystery, the revenge. You're cordially invited to step into the looks, where the secrets are dark and the sins are delicious. I swear, this whole series is Anna Godberson's gift to historical fiction, I would say. I love this book. And the reason why I'm recommending this for historical fiction is generally historical fiction can get complicated for beginners, and if you haven't read it before, it could seem a little overwhelming. But this book tries to keep that balance between the language as well as society in 1800s. So it will be easy to go through it as well as get into the beauty of the book. So that is my recommendation for historical fiction. So there you go. Those are all my recommendations for these genres. I will come up with another whole set of beginner-friendly books for a few other genres like science fiction, like romance, like whodunit mysteries. I know there are a lot of other genres I have to cover, so let's do that separately. But if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like, and I will see you in another video. Bye.